Hello, Susan.
Hi, good morning, everyone.
Sending the voice from your side.
Oh, really? Still, you can't hear anything? Okay.
Hi, Susan. Hi, Bingbing.
Hi. Where's the chat window?
Hello, everyone.
Hello, Akash.
Hey, sorry, am I logging in as CNCF upstream?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I was wondering, like, just two.
Yeah,
upstream.
I don't know.
Actually,
Yes.
Luis, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, okay, great. Do you mind just you can stay logged in as CNCF upstream and I'll log out because I have some people doing some work outside and I may get disconnected due to they might need to like temporarily turn the power off and on.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'll join as my Microsoft account.
Okay. I think you need to make me a host though.
Okay.
Or should I do that?
It's very interesting. Make host.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So let me leave. I'm going to leave the meeting and then I'll join back.
Okay. Hello. We're just waiting for Susan to rejoin.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hello. Hi, Luis. I'm back.
Cool. So now maybe I should make you the host. Are you gonna present?
Yeah, I'll present. If you make me the host, even if I get disconnected, then the host might like if I left, I don't end the meeting for everybody.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, you're the host then.
Thank you. Let me share my screen.
We can see your screen.
Thanks. Is it the whole screen or just the process? Yeah, I can see the little rectangle now. It looks like it's just a process. Great. And let me, okay. Because I'm extending my screen, my Zoom just went like crazy a little bit. But cool. Anybody? Let me zoom out a little bit. Yeah, we can get started now. Bin, I added the OPA engine to the agenda, but it looks like you were able to merge the PR.
Right. I think it was merged yesterday. Let me check.
Cool. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
It was,
Thank you,
it's been,
Akash.
so any follow-up items on the OPA engine? Are we ready
Yeah.
to release it with the next RC?
I have a following PR to add CRD support, but I guess that will be post this release.
Okay, and the CRD support would be behind the same feature flag or
This-
a new feature flag, like a different one?
I feel we don't need a new feature flags for the CRD stuff because they are. I feel they are the same thing, so it will be just behind the same feature flag.
Got it. So are we targeting, Luis, what is the target date for RC7? But I'm
So
imagining we're not taking the CRD. We're not waiting for the CRD.
no, so the target, so we originally had RC6 be a month. Let's see,
I remember RC7 was 21st,
Mm.
July 21st.
yes,
So are
so
we pushing that out?
yeah, yeah, the original RC7 was, or RC6 was July, yeah, the third week of July. So we're already at 12, so that gives us 1 week. We can, I mean, yeah, we can chat more. Do we need this change? At this point, I feel like this would be our last big release for features. Kind of what we were saying is like anything we want for stable needs to go on this and then have like a smaller release right afterwards, just for bug fixing and any feedback that we might get. That was gonna be originally RC7, but now since we basically shift upward, that would be our RC8. Yeah, I'm happy to. I'm open to discussing the date for this one, since this is probably our last chance to get any big changes in.
Yeah, E, you have your hand up.
Yes. I have two things to discuss. The first thing is related to the RC release and the stable release timeline. I think if we are targeting September, sometime in September for the stable release, then probably, because currently it's July, right? We have one less than 2 months. So I think maybe we can discuss or we can confirm the scope for the stable release to see whether any feature are missing or any feature is still ongoing. Then we probably can decide which RC will be the final RC. And for the other features that's not planned in the stable release, maybe we can think about some other branch policies. For example, maybe we can use a feature branch to continue to develop that feature so that it will not impact the main branch. So after stable release is cut, we can merge feature back. So I mean, we can. The point is that we couldn't have too many RCs, right? And if we are fine with current scope for a stable release, then we probably need to have one RC as the final RC, which means that all the feature we think is in that RC, then we will leave for 1 or 2 weeks for bug fixing, then we can cut stable release. So probably we needed to discuss about this. Then with this, we can end this too many access issues, and we will be clear on the stable release time and the scope. And also we can, I know there are some big features that, like Susan, you are working on the gRPC and also pluggable certificate store support, and Akash is working on the support high availability, and also involving Dapper and the PVC some features, right? So these are the bigger ones. So if we can, if we decided to split this kind of feature, we can align what we need in stable release, and for others, maybe we can consider some strategy. And like what I suggest, maybe we can consider some branch strategies to continue develop new features. This is one thing. Another thing is related to this agenda item that Bingbing is working on. So my understanding is that this feature is from the, from the design or framework point of view that we support regular policy, but from the user point of view, user cannot use it yet, right? We still use the current way that user configure Ratify policy file for this certificate verification, right?
Yeah, the default way is using the config policy.
Yeah, because I'm thinking that I also saw your message yesterday that maybe we need to discuss when we can switch to the regular policy, because it might impact other cloud providers.
Yeah.
So so this feature is only for we can support the regular policy, but it is not from user point of view. We didn't announce it yet, right?
Right.
So it's behind the feature flag. So if the user wants to try it out, they can enable the feature and pass in the regular policy. Is that correct, Bingbing?
Right.
Okay, so
it's
users
option.
Okay, so that means with this feature merged, users have the option to enable regular policy.
Right.
Correct.
Okay, so that means that we support this kind of regular policy. Okay.
Yeah. So
so
my question
following up on Bingbing's question. Sorry, someone was speaking. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. So yeah, my previous question was, so how long do we want to keep both policies, and do we want to just keep the regular policy in the GA release?
I think sorry.
Go ahead, Yi.
Yeah, I think for V1, at least for now, I don't see any reason we want to switch to the default one. But this also means that if we want to switch it later, right, it will cost some. Do we still support the old way? If not, it will be a breaking, right, for the user, from the user point of view.
Yeah, so a question for E and Feynman, like how, once we ship a feature in the stable release, how long do we have to support it? And is it okay, like if we remove it, we'll just have to bump up the version to 2.0 alpha?
Yeah, if it is a breaking change, we need to bump up the major version if we have to. Yeah. So normally we try to avoid bumping up a major version too soon, right, after a stable release. But if it is really necessary for some cases. For example, if any security advisory issue that requires to break some issues, then we have to do that. But normally we don't do that too soon after stable release. So this means that if we want to switch to the default using regular policy, we also should inform our users, right? So that they are aware of these changes.
Yes, we should have an announcement that this feature is optional for now, and after V1, we should like encourage our users to use the regular policy instead of the config policy, and then someday we do the migration or the switch.
Yeah. Do we anticipate any partners making a switch? Like, is any partner waiting for this feature?
I think if we change this default behavior to using to use regular policy, I think all the users are impacted because currently they configure the Ratify policy, right? They need to switch to the new way. And
yeah, it depends
and they
on.
also,
go ahead, E.
Yeah, I mean they also need to learn Rego if they didn't.
Yeah, Bin in the current implementation, we provide the default Rego policy as a template, or is there anything for the user to author?
No, we have a default template, which is the same as the default like config policy in our Helm charts. So basically, if they just switch the option, the feature flag, the behavior would be the same. But if they have some like customized like config policy, then they have to write their own Rego policy.
Yeah, I would suggest that maybe first we can we can start a discussion in the Slack channel. So all the upstream people working on Ratify or even user in that Slack channel, they will be aware of this and they can share their comments and or concerns. And we can also reach out to some cloud provider who is currently using Ratify to seek for feedback from them. I mean, if we think this is this should be the default, I mean, Rego policy should be the default, then we'd better do it as early as possible, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Cool. Feynman just shared the link to the provider refactor design document.
Yeah.
Feynman, should I scroll to a specific section?
Yeah, I want to go deep to the specific with experience of changing to the config policy provider. So as I know, Ratify has not been widely deployed or adopted by end users so far. So I think we may not have too much concerns about the migration from config policy to Rego policy. But I think the biggest point, the most important point is that we can provide a smooth experience for users to get started with Rego policy, as they are still, whatever we are using the Rego policy or config policy as a default configuration, they're still new to our users, as you know, Ratify is still in early stage. And so I think the most important thing is that we have enough sample or templates for those regular policies with common cases. So I want to make sure that in Bingbing's proposal or in Bingbing's design, we have those common cases covered, those templates covered in the CRD, and users will be easy to understand what are those common use cases they can use to configure their verification scenario. I believe we will have some common scenarios, and I see there are some checks in the regular policy CRD. So maybe Bingbing, you can help us deep dive into this part, if possible.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I mean, if you can point out those sample templates for the new regular policy in this proposal, then we can have a quick look at if those templates are enough for our common use cases.
Actually, I also
can navigate
added
to that.
yeah. I added 2 samples in the doc.
Oh, in your PR, right? The merge
Yeah,
one?
it's already merged. I guess it's on the reference and the providers. If you scroll down to regular policy, there will be an example. Yeah, scroll down, regular policy example. So this is the example input. And if you keep scrolling down, there will be 2 cases. One is for the default. For the config policy, we have like 2 example policies, and one is we set the default to all, and one is set default to any, and so it will cover both of them. The first example would be the default the default is all. And this is one for the default is any. Huh? It's not working. Oh, I should fix that.
You mean the link?
Yeah.
It's working. I'm just checking where it points to, because both
Oh.
example points to the same MD. Like, but I think if we point the user to this section, they should be able to work out that the equivalent of example 1 would be all reference artifact is required to be successful, and because we don't have link to this specific bullet point,
Right. I can fix
but
it.
it looks fine to me. Feynman, does this example look good to you?
Yeah, I see we already have equivalent examples as the config policy that we prepared before, comparing with the regular policy and the config policy, right?
Right. Those are 2 very basic 2 examples.
Yeah, I think we still need to validate if those regular policies work for our common scenarios. I think I can help to get it to try and see how it will complicate my scenario or simplify my scenario.
Yeah, thank you.
I have a question. Oh, go ahead.
I also saw a proposal from Susan, and which is similar to my thoughts. I think maybe we can make the regular policy and config policy coexist for a couple of versions, and and still enable the config policy to cover basic scenarios of basic configuration. And I see the regular policy is much less flexible, but it still has too many learning learning curves that users need to do, especially for learning Rego, as we discussed. So I'm thinking we can also keep Rego policy as in for advanced use cases. So users
Right.
can configure or enable the Rego policy via feature flag or environmental variable.
Right. I think that's what we basically agreed on the last. I think the other concern here was that we still don't know at this point if Rego is going to be sort of the sticking language for writing policies. There's also conversations around maybe CL. And so I think what we discussed last time and that we kind of agreed was, let's continue supporting config. Let's add this Rego policy support. And then sort of, if we want to deprecate this, at some point, do it as a new version. So I do feel strongly that we should continue supporting both, moving on our first stable version.
Yep, Sajay have his hand up.
Yeah, I'm kind of late to the party at this point. I'm just trying to understand, are we removing something that's causing a breaking change, or is it only additive at this point?
So if we remove,
yeah.
Go
ahead.
Oh, thank you. So if we remove the current config policy, it will be a breaking change.
Yes.
At
and
this
we're not
point, we're
doing
only
that.
adding the option to use Rego.
Okay, so I don't have any concerns then. As long as we're not breaking anybody, it's okay. The point is, when we GA, do we keep that or not is the question, I think.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
But
We
I
have to
think
keep that in.
I mean we're having the exact same conversation that last time. So I think that we've let's just agree today and put it documented in the notes that we'll support config and we'll support Rego. Because again, like we don't know if Rego is eventually going to be the sticking
Sounds good.
language.
Sounds good.
So yeah, let's just make that call. Seems like a
yeah. How do we? Okay, can somebody show how this thing will get kicked in? Like, how do you configure to use Rego? Maybe that's my question. In the policy section. I'm sorry,
in the doc or in the
I'm
template?
wasting others' time, but I really apologize. Been on vacation and catching up on so many emails. All right.
Let me go to the PR. I think that'll be the easiest. Bin, do you know the PR ID? Let me just search for. Okay, let me go back to the notes and just click on the link I already have there. Maybe we could start with the config map, the changes here. Bin, do you want to walk through it? Like, how would the user enable the Rego policy instead of
Okay,
the
so
config
there is already a value that you have to toggle to enable use Rego policy, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
the flag right here.
Then it's totally fine. It's up to the customer or whoever's using it to toggle it on. Basically, what I'm asking is, I see some unique scenario where the canned bake policy, they'll say, oh, no, we want something a little bit more unique. And then you can point them to this, but they're kind of on their own. And we'll get feedback. And like, I think everybody agrees that if we were to yank this out, it would be a breaking change, but we have time to make the decision. So as long as the V1 has multiple capabilities and people can kind of like try it out, and all the implementation, we're kind of like offloading to the OPA engine. We're not, any bugs or anything would be probably bugs in the engine itself is the hope, but minor patch release to make sure that this policy is honored is okay. So I don't see, I mean, my vote here would be to just GA with both. We might not see much adoption, but that would always give us a data point to deprecate it, versus if you didn't GA it, then we would have one customer who might say, oh, we wanted this unique policy, which we cannot achieve through Rego or through config. And then maybe that we can ship like additive.
Yeah, Akash asked a good question. So if we GA'd with both and the regular policy is behind a feature flag, are features behind feature flag considered production ready?
Yes, my understanding is this is not an experimental environment variable that you have to set up that lights up this feature flag. It's actually a flag that somebody can use, right? And it's going to be in the documentation as a supported extensible option. I don't see feature flagging as a way to skirt supporting. We would support it because it's a valid flag, right? Like it's like you use a product and you turn on a feature on and off. It's not like I'm losing the warranty of this. Does that make sense, Akash?
Yeah, I think maybe there's like a semantic difference because I know we were using experimental and feature flag interchangeably at certain points. So is this now, are we landing on this is now a feature flag and it's on and off advanced mode, but advanced mode is still full support for.
My understanding is this is a feature flag. There's no experimental flag guarding this, right? Or am I reading this wrong?
Yes, all our feature flags at this point is like feature flag, but like say for dynamic plugins, right? Like we're not validating the signature on the image what we pull down from remote registry. It's kind of experimental. It's like use at your own risk.
Exactly. Like we wouldn't want, I don't know if we'd want someone using a dynamic plugin support in a production environment, considering that those plugins have no support for like verification at this point.
That's fine. So, I think that experimental, you turn on the experimental flag. So the experimental flag, okay, the way I see it is the experimental feature flag is something we would ship and support, right? Like certain set of features might be guarded behind the experimental flag, but I don't see Rego as being guarded behind an experimental flag. It's a feature that we would support, same way like we would support AKV as a feature or some other kind of like provider on the thing. So I don't see that. Does that make sense?
I see. Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
Does that mean we should update our dynamic plugin feature flag to say something like experimental dynamic plugin, or introduce another experimental feature flag?
Before I take more time, I have a few questions. How do we turn on experimental features?
Currently, we don't have an experimental
we don't have like a division between experimental and flag.
Okay, maybe that is something we need to quickly sort out before we ship this. So, okay, so now I see your concern that all feature flags are considered experimental because you don't have an experimental. Okay, let's kind of at least maybe queue that up and put that behind some environment variable that you have to configure so that it gets set and other things can light up or the code. Okay, sorry. Yeah, like exactly. So Shu is kind of chatting on the side, like Docker build kit. Helm had OCI experimental. I think you should have Ratify experimental. Notation also has notation experimental. So let's just follow the same pattern. One environment variable that you need to set to light these things up is fair.
Yeah, I will create a tracking issue for this. E, you have a hand up?
Yeah, I have a similar concern as Cash because the feature flag looks like something as we discussed the experimental. So I'm thinking that from the Helm chart from the Kubernetes, for example, it could be a parameter, right? So if the user set the parameter to Rego, for example, then it means they will use the Rego policy. If the same parameter name equals to, for example, just an example, Ratify config, then use the current way. So it could be a config, right? But the config parameter has a different values. But with the feature flag, it looks like something, right? A user can disable it or enable it for some reasons that they don't want to have it in the stable release. Yeah, we can, yeah, as Sajay and Susan, we just discussed, we can have some follow-up on this one. Yeah.
So the YAML that's being shown right now has a set of feature flags, which is Ratify, use Rego, use pass-through, sort rotation. What are we planning to not put behind Or is there anything that we plan to put behind experimental here? The one thing that Akash was talking about was plugin, right?
Akash, did the in-memory HA, I think that was also going to be experimental, correct?
Okay, so maybe we can have a set of flags that are, unless you set this extra environment variable, don't light up, and they don't, and you just, as soon as you see that, you kind of like just die, right? Saying that, okay, I don't understand this. And like crash the pod or something like that, or give feedback saying that this is not a supported scenario. I wouldn't use naming as a way to distinguish it. I would actually use another variable that you explicitly set, or an environment variable that you set. So maybe some history. We agreed on this feature flag as an element in the YAML, right? At this point, I'm seeing a lot of head nods, so I'm assuming it's a yes. Okay, so feature flags is a way to kind of define what capabilities you want to light up. Sounds good. So why wouldn't we just call them features? There are flags. Okay, fine. I'm not going there. I'm going to leave it to you folks to keep that. Okay, this is bike sharing at the end. Okay, let's move on. Sorry.
Okay, thanks for the feedback, everyone. The next,
I mean, I think just to quickly answer your question, so I think for a lot of these, we wanted to sort of, I mean, we were kind of using exchangeably the term experimental and feature flags because we kind of needed more feedback from customers. So we want to kind of have a way to introduce them to customers in a way that we sort of take away a little bit of the liability of not finding every single bug or not completely defining some of these features. So, but yeah, I think it's a good point. Maybe just introducing the difference between a feature flag and an experimental flag.
yeah, I will create a tracking GitHub issue for that. And I'll put it in the RC7 milestone for now.
Yes.
Sorry, one more comment. Maybe we can also check how other projects using these features. I mean, we can check the other best practice.
Yeah.
I also remember I saw maybe years ago that some Helm charts something like, for example, Rego, then under the Rego is in the YAML file under the Rego. For example, there will be a enable parameter and also some other parameter related to Rego. So user can in the Helm chart to disable it, but there is no explicitly that's mentioning feature flag. It sounds like something experimental, as Akash just mentioned. We can seek for best practice for this. And I also think we needed to get it done before the stable release.
Yeah, we will have a look at, someone was mentioning Notary has an experimental variable. We can also look at Gatekeeper to be somewhat consistent there.
Yeah, thanks.
The other open PR that we have is the cache. I know Akash, you've labeled it as do not merge. So I guess this one is targeting, I don't know which version of Ratify is the caching code targeting, if we're not targeting GA.
Yeah, so this one, so the current state of the PR is that it's now ready for review. So if anyone could take some time and provide any feedback possible. It's very much like most of the components are the same as the previous PR that was working on Redis directly. And I just closed that PR and then created this one and added Dapper on top of that. And as far as how it'll ship, I think it will probably ship. My goal is to have it ship in RC7, and it'll be behind a feature flag. And then if we introduce the experimental flag must be turned on before that feature flag is enabled. Because we're still figuring out, I'm working with some of the gatekeeper people to figure out like how we want Redis to actually interact with Dapper. There's some concerns on TLS and things like that. So still working through those, but those aren't specific to like a Ratify implementation scenario, because right now Ratify just deals with Dapper directly. And the open questions are more on how Dapper and Redis would interact. So that's my plan for now.
Cool. Thanks for the update. Any feedback on the plan? Like we'll be checking this into main and behind an experimental flag. Hi, Sajay.
Hey,
Go ahead.
the question for Akash, you removed the key number and the capacity and you introduced the cache enable right here. How do we determine, like, taking those configuration values away? What's the expectation? Does Dapper know these configuration values, or we don't care about it?
So the key values, so this PR introduces the ristretto as the centralized cache for in-memory, which is the default value that we're going to set when you ship with the Helm chart. So those values we actually don't need to set anymore, because they were used for another caching implementation, which we were using the K8's API machinery. Those were using some of those values. So that's why I removed those, because we're no longer using that. In terms of Dapper, so Dapper itself doesn't actually configure the size of the cache itself. That's dependent on the state store that you implement, that you connect to Dapper with. So that would be user's responsibility to configure the Helm chart for Redis with the corresponding, memory limits and things like that.
Do we have any documentation on that you plan to add?
Yes. So
okay.
I've added a guide that I'll add to after we figure out more of how we want to the exact recommendation for the Redis installation, but it's basically a walkthrough on how you would install Dapper, how we would recommend you install a Redis chart, what values and things like that. But it's a recommendation, because Ratify is not going to own the installation and management of that. So
I think it's okay to give. I mean, if somebody wants to get started, they shouldn't kind of like hit a snag on, oh, it's taking me time to install Dapper. You can say this is like a canonical, like basically this is a prepackaged demo or dev environment that we think you can start running, right? I think that's what we're giving. We're not giving them the way to run it.
Yes. Well, it depends on if we're giving them the steps to run it. We're not giving them like a full baked one where we're not attaching to our Helm chart a prereq for Dapper or Redis.
Okay, but are we putting like a hack or in somewhere in the docs or something that they can literally copy paste or like kick off? Like, can we give a test Dapper chart, or is there a test Dapper chart that they can kind of like quickly point to and run with a single line, or do they need to create a different chart and things like that? If it's just a one line copy paste, then it's okay. But if it's more like they have to create a chart, set up a bunch of machines or something like that gets really complicated. But we can take it offline if you have, once you kind of get the docs, we'll think about it.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's fair. I think the goal is to have each Redis be a one-line installation, Dapper be a one-line installation, so that there's no more manual steps required. So,
right.
Yeah.
Hey, Feynman.
Is it Luis? Have his hand up?
Yes, it's me.
Okay. CNC upstream is hard to.
Yeah, I know, sorry. So Akash, just one question. On the conversations you've had around sort of using the Dapper dependency for, is it still a possibility that we don't end up using Dapper at all, or is this something that we've all kind of now just sort of figuring out the last couple details, but it's a done deal that we will go and basically getting the dependency on Dapper?
As of now, yeah, my thought is that we will go full forward with Dapper,
Okay.
Especially given our alignment with Gatekeeper on that. So I don't have a reason or even another close second as to us using it, because I don't think it makes sense at this point for us to build support directly for Redis into Ratify.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I just wanted to make sure that, yeah, that we were aligned with Gatekeeper.
And Feynman have his hand up.
Yeah. So could you open the link that I shared in this chat box? I wanna also deep dive into the HA deployment experience, and I have some questions related to Akash PR, and especially for this document. Yeah, I have a few concerns around the HA deployment and also the experience. So the first question is, if users have already installed Ratify with a single pod, I think we can call it single Ratify mode for testing purposes. So in this method, if users want to shift from single mode to the HA mode, is there a way that they can smooth shift from an HA mode?
Yeah,
For
that's
example, maybe they just
a-
enable the Dapper and the Redis installation, or any further actions they need. I'm asking these things as I was previously working on a Kubernetes distribution project, and we provide options for users that they can upgrade their Kubernetes cluster from single to an HA mode by extending their master, or we say control plane node. They don't need to reinstall a new fresh cluster. So I think maybe users will thinking about how can they smoothly shift from a single mode to an HA mode without reinstall the Ratify and also those prerequisites.
Yeah, that's a great point. As of now, I think if we put aside the prereqs in terms of Dapper Redis installation, it does require a Helm chart upgrade, which would inevitably recreate the underlying Ratify pod. So it wouldn't be an extension where a replica would come up and it would just work, because you're actually switching the cache provider that's used, and that's installed on Ratify startup. So the transition would require a reinstallation at this point. So, but I think, yeah, I can follow up and we can create an item to track it. And I think this is going to be an issue also for like a managed experience, or the relationship between Gatekeeper and Ratify, in terms of Gatekeeper has requirements for Redis and Dapper in certain scenarios for their pub sub scenarios, and then if Ratify also has it for HA, but if Gatekeeper doesn't have that installed and we have that installed, or the vice versa, how does the management of those two work? And then how do we align in terms of like the Redis version and the TLS and all the capabilities that are installed are actually met from both Gatekeeper and Ratify's perspective. So there's like some coordination that needs to happen there.
So I think, I see Sajay also has a comment related to the upgrading to HA. This should be an additional user story apart from the HA installation, I guess.
I think it'll be easier to test it also if it's a different scenario. Otherwise, we'll forget, right? We need to cover the upgrade story. And if we do the upgrade story, do we cover the downgrade story? That's also equally a problematic thing. So I'm not going to go there, but at least let's capture the issue and then we can think about it.
Yeah, I can help create an issue, but I don't think downgrade from HA to a single mode is a common scenario. But usually,
call out, right? Like at least we do the test to block it. Like you cannot do this.
Well, once a customer realizes the additional costs, they might want to just say, okay, I don't need this.
If they don't need this, they will uninstall instead of downgrade. I think the the most common scenario is that users will first start with a single Ratify pod by just maybe 1 or 2 commands. And next, if they feel that Ratify meets their needs, they will consider and find a way to upgrade from a single pod mode to the HA mode.
Yep.
This is what I got the experience from my previous Kubernetes distribution project. Users always upgrade their Kubernetes cluster from single node to an HA cluster. And they don't want any workloads running on their cluster will be impacted during the upgrading process. Or it should be a very limited downtime during the upgrade process.
Makes sense.
Once the this PR is stable, are we following the same long-term plan of maintaining HA and non-HA, or are we going to once we give time for this to stabilize, we're just going to go all in with HA, like it's going to be default on? Like, are there any advantage of not having HA to the customer?
I think it's like it's very heavy, so it's going to require like Dapper and Redis and all these different resources to be installed, and that won't change. And
yeah,
there will be scenarios where it just is not required, I think. So
I see. So the long-term plan is having both options for the customer.
Yeah, we should definitely have a spec for lighting up HA, kind of what the customer experience is there. Again, I mean, we haven't had HA for a while and it's been okay, but definitely customers with a lot, like much larger clusters and like, or like a lot of load or a lot of different images to load, they might need it. So yeah, but again, like the whole light up experience, the upgrade, all of these seems to be things that we just need more speccing as well. So let's document those.
Well, another concern about the HA installation. So as I see, we introduced more than 2 prerequisites for enabling an HA mode. I think typically the Redis and Dapper users will need to import those Helm chart repository and then install those Helm charts, right?
Right.
So I'm thinking maybe we can develop or provide or package those prerequisites, those dependencies into a dedicated installer, and users don't need to install them one by one. I still feel that there are a lot of prerequisites for Ratify users they need to understand, they need to learn before they set up an HA mode of Ratify cluster. Maybe we can provide a configurable file for users to choose. They want to start with a single mode or an HA mode, and we will have a config file such as config.yaml with those environmental variables, or we say variables that users can configure in that YAML file for those prerequisites, for those dependencies.
So Feynman, do we feel like customers that are already using Gatekeeper in HA mode, they will already have these dependencies?
Sorry,
like,
do you mean?
Like, do we see a scenario where is Ratify actually the only? Well, I guess if the customer is not using Gatekeeper, then that's probably the scenario you're kind of thinking it will be a additional load, right?
Yeah, actually, my point is that maybe we can provide a dedicated installer for HA mode and package all of those dependencies required for an HA installation. So I think users may not want to install Dapper, Redis, and maybe Gatekeeper as as prerequisites before setting up Ratify
Right.
HA cluster.
Yeah,
I'm
that's,
thinking we can simplify the experience of installing Ratify. And
no, that seems really good idea, Fem. But we do need some spec as well on how do we want to package this, and like I feel it is a good point that we want to make it as simple for customer to have all the needed dependencies. We just need to spec out the scenario here, how we want to present this to customers.
Thanks for the suggestion, Payman.
yeah, I can also help create another issue for define the HA or obviously the general installation of the Ratify. I think along with more and more prerequisites and dependencies we introduced, it will definitely complicate the installation of Ratify.
Right. Yep. I mean, Feynman, if you know any other open source projects that already have to do like a package installation, like a lump package installation, and maybe we can do something similar here.
Yeah, I know some other projects which has their dedicated installer for installing different dependencies and prerequisites. I can write an issue and share it in our channel.
Yep, sounds great.
Thank you. We have 2 minutes left. I just want to quickly talk about the gRPC investigation status. And we can, just to get the conversation started, and then we can continue with the rest of the agenda. I'll move them to next week. So for the gRPC investigation, I've had several discussions with Binbin, and I've briefly captured my current target for the prototype in this diagram that I drew. So today, like Ratify would call the individual plugins through sub-processes and communicate on standard in and standard out. So with gRPC, the Ratify server will spin up the gRPC server, and we could have a single server for verifiers store, or we can have separate ones that it's open to discussion. But the workflow would be, there will be routes specified in the gRPC server. For example, like for the verifier plugin interface, it'll be, there's a service route for verify references. So when Ratify needs to have something validated, it calls the gRPC server, hey, validate this piece of artifact, and the gRPC server would direct the call to the individual plugins and collect the report and send it back to Ratify. So with the workflow in mind, we realized that we need, like first step, we need to define the new plugin models. So we are evaluating like the, yeah, just reading your comment, Payman. I couldn't figure out how to draw arrows in Visio, which is why I went on paper. So I'm currently experimenting with the Go plugin package, and the CSE team previously have committed, like they've checked in some proto files for the verifier and store. So I'm seeing what's reusable. But at the moment, the loop of going through each individual verifier, for example, that business logic is in the executor. So if we were to, if the gRPC server is going to handle this, like redirecting the verifier reference check to individual plugin, so the executor would need to be refactored so that the loop might be moved from Ratify to gRPC server. So there will be some major refactoring needed there. And when we are creating new verifiers or removing ratifiers, we have today the CRD manager in Ratify. Again, that might need to move to the gRPC server. So just an initial discussion on the timeline. What I think is because this work requires like major refactoring on all the components, the executor, the CRD manager, the store, a lot of the interface and the message types would need to be moved around a bit. So I think this change would be targeting the next alpha because it's just very risky to include them in 1.0. So I just want to get some initial feedback on like the design and the timeline. Any thoughts, anyone?
I think so. I think this is makes sense to me. Given we have only a couple months to get V1 and the risk, unless we have a very compelling reason to have this on V1, I agree on the timeline here. I think Feynman, you had some concerns. Do you feel like we need this on V1?
I was talk about the Blackbow
Yes.
certificate store design was planned in V1, and I believe gRPC designs a part of that Blackbow store design. Since the Blackbow store design will introduce breaking change to Ratify, so we were thinking that this refactoring should be placed before we won.
Yeah, I feel like,
yeah.
I feel like the scope of the changes and the risk, at this point at least, it doesn't seem like there's a compelling reason to try to rush this into a V1, and I think it's acceptable to sort of introduce it as part of a second version.
Sajay and E, you both have hand up. I think Sajay was first.
Yeah, I would propose we actually create a 1.0 milestone. And or sorry, a 1.1 milestone, and add this to that so that it's clear that this is not coming in 1.0, but it's not sitting in the backlog and rotting somewhere. So if somebody's going to come and look for this issue, they know it's in the next milestone and it's prioritized. There might be an RC in between, but at least you have 1.0, 1.1, and then we can talk about it. That would be my recommendation, because I'm feeling like more and more projects that I go to, unless the next milestone is already defined and some dates are put in and some items are there, people don't get an indication of how critical this is or whether it's in track. And if we can bring in things into the milestone and move the milestone around, but at least have one milestone so that we know that this is the next thing and people are not left guessing as to whether we're doing this gRPC work. That would be my recommendation.
Sajay, are there guidelines in how do we do minor versions versus major versions? Like why this 1 point something as opposed to a 2?
I would imagine that if you're talking about a 2, we're looking at nothing less than 6 months, right? It's
Right.
a major version bump. So are we going to wait for 6 months for this to be there? Also, if it is an additive change, why wouldn't we do it in a 1.1? I mean, OCI took 4 years to do, or like 3 years to do 1.1. That's a different problem. But I live in a slow time stream is what I realized. But I think we can quantify that. We know that 1.1 is going to happen, right? There's going to be patches, there's going to be fixes.
Mm-hmm.
Let's call it a day, put a milestone in and say like in 2 months we'll ship this versus 2.0 is kind of far down the line, unless you have a major rewrite of Ratify that you're planning for a 2.0 with a breaking change. Like say, for example, we want to remove Rego or remove some policy features, then we would do it's a 2.0. So otherwise, I think if it's additive, all the features should be just 1.1.
I see. So, okay, got it. I think Yi has his hands up.
Yeah, I think from the from the customer point of view, at least for now, and though they didn't join today's meeting, I mean, from the customer point of view, I think to support, I think this is not only to support the pluggable service store, right? It also impact all the infrastructure that Ratify currently is building. I think the timeline is okay for me because I don't see any, at least for now, requirement that we need to have this support. We need to plug in a new service store. So, and I also understand the big changes behind this. So I think this timeline is okay. And also for 1.0, we have a built-in service store supports for the cloud provider. I think that's fine. Yeah, at least unless later in upcoming months we found that there are other users urgently asking for this, then we can reconsider this priority.
Yeah, thanks for the feedback. I will change this cell here. So we're gonna put it in 1.1 for now. So we're already 8 minutes over. I just want to check if are there any blocking? Is anyone blocked by these agenda items, or are we okay moving these 2 items till next week? Or we can also follow up in the Slack channel.
Yeah, so for the multi-arc image issue, it was raised by in the community. So maybe we can discuss it later in the Slack.
Yeah, sounds good. Cool. Thanks for joining the call, everyone. We'll see you next week.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.
Thanks all. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm also just reading Shui's message. Ratify is having more and more plugins. Will the architecture of Containerd be helpful to Ratify? Yeah, I don't have an answer right now. We do have a Ratify issue that tracks something related to Containerd, but I'll look into it more.
Yeah, I remember Akash is working on Containerd plugin for Ratify. So
Yeah.
I think we can continue to confirm with Shui. If there's anything we can learn from Containerd's plugin design.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks, Eamon.
Okay, see you soon.
Take care.